Subconscious pattern detective Lion Goodman helps you uncover the underlying beliefs getting in the way of your greatest desires. Join us as Lion explains how our beliefs influence our lives, the difference between beliefs and core beliefs, and why a multidimensional approach is required in order to permanently change unwanted beliefs that are no longer serving you. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show. Great to have everybody here again. And I wanted to take a quick moment to just do a shout out to a friend of ours, Steve, who we came across and met out here in Mexico just a little while back. And I just wanted to share Steve's story really quickly because it's not so uncommon. And a lot of times people just don't realize what's happened to people over this past year and a half. And we came across Steve at a restaurant out here randomly with Taya and my kids. And Steve is actually from New Zealand, and he's been stuck in Mexico for the past year and a half because when COVID restrictions happened, New Zealand got locked down really tight. And there's apparently a lot of people from New Zealand that are out of the country that have not been able to come back because of such backlog and the time that's required to get them in and then isolated and all of the stuff that goes on. So Steve's actually been out here and he's got a family, he's got a wife, and he's got two children that are back in New Zealand that he has not seen for over a year and a half. And he's basically been here in Mexico and going in and out of Mexico at different times to keep his visa active. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because we've come across Steve a few different times, and lately we have not seen him. And the last time I saw him, he had a pretty bad stomach bug, and we haven't heard from him since. So I'm just putting a shout out there that Steve, if you're listening to this, because when we met Steve, he was actually a big fan of the show. And so that's how we kind of got connected and got chatting, but we didn't get his actual contact info. So Steve, if you're out there and you're okay, just send us an Instagram message and let us know where you are, and then we can connect up. Okay. We hope you're well, and we're sending our prayers to you and your family. Okay. Now, on another note, we just finished doing our short little filming for a documentary that's going to be coming out in the near future. And our part was specifically talking just a little bit around pesticides and mycotoxin exposure. And so, again, if this is something you guys aren't aware of, it's a big deal. I mean, pesticides are literally in everything. I mean, everything, including you. And I think the most groundbreaking study that I came across was one by the Environmental Working Group, where it showed that over 200 different chemicals, pollutants, and pesticides in the cord blood of newborns. So as soon as they were born, they checked the cord blood and they found over 200 different contaminants. So it's there right from birth. That's a given. And mycotoxins, if you're not aware of that, mycotoxins are the toxic chemical that molds produce. Okay. And molds tend to grow in crops that go through a drying process and have a longer storage time. So things like grains and corn and coffee. And so we were doing a little section just talking about coffee specifically because this is a concern. And if you've ever had coffee that has mold in it and you're sensitive to it, you can notice a very big difference when you actually have coffee that's been tested to guarantee that it is mold free or mycotoxin free. So if you've never had that experience yet, I implore you to go and try mycotoxin-free coffee and see if you notice a difference, because there's a lot of benefits to having coffee, and a lot of people really enjoy coffee. I really enjoy having coffee in the morning, but you do notice a difference, is particularly if you are sensitive at all to it. And even if you're not, it's good to just avoid it, period, because mycotoxins are related to things like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and mood dysregulation disorders like anxiety, depression, ADHD. I mean, a whole ton of different things. So if you haven't tried mycotoxin-free coffee yet, click the link below and go to Ascent Nutrition and try their mycotoxin-free coffee from local organic farmers in Guatemala. So check it out and then let me know if you notice the difference. Now, on the topic of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and the repercussions that can sometimes happen from mycotoxin exposure. I mean, I've had lots of patients that have been exposed to mold toxins, and it's really ruined their life in many ways. One of the other things that happens with that is often you end up with really compromised mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are those powerhouses in the cell that basically create energy production, and that needs to be working top notch. So if you've got troubles with sleep, or if you've got low energy or low libido or any of these things, this could all be partly related to even down regulation of mitochondrial function. one of the things that I think is really important to add into your regime to assist with all of those symptoms, as well as just trying to optimize things like inflammation and oxidative load on the body and mitochondrial function, is C60. C60 is that incredibly powerful antioxidant that helps to try to optimize all of those main underlying causes of illness. So if you haven't checked C60 out, check out C60 from Purple Power. Check the link below. With C60, you'll get 15% off your order. Just use promo code DRLOKEN, and same promo code with Ascent Nutrition. They will give you 10% off their order. So check the links and see what you think. Now, in this episode, we talked to Lion Goodman, and Lion is basically a subconscious pattern detective. He has literally spent his life dialing in on beliefs. He recognizes that beliefs are at the core of almost everything, and that if we have unconscious beliefs that we have not worked with and we have not cleared, that they will basically be running the show for our life. Now, when we were doing this series on energy, frequency, and vibration, we knew at some point we had to get into beliefs, because beliefs are at the core of almost everything. And when I read books like Bruce Lipton's The Biology of Belief, or when I looked at Greg Braden's book, The Spontaneous Healing of Belief, you understand how powerful beliefs are in influencing everything from what partner we're going to be with, what kind of a job we're going to have, to how we're going to even be able to heal in our bodies. I mean, it is a big deal. And what Greg Braden showed was that the beliefs essentially play a dramatic role in creating the electromagnetic field that goes off the body and interacts with others around us and the world around us. So we knew we needed to talk to somebody specific about beliefs, and Lion was well recommended by another teacher of ours, Anadea Judith, who in a course that she and Lion had put together on creating on purpose. And so we talk about that a fair bit, but Lion really dives into beliefs. He explains how beliefs are multidimensional and that you need a multidimensional approach to working with them. Otherwise, you will never clear beliefs completely. And this is really important. It's why a lot of times belief clearing techniques don't work so well. So Lion helps us understand what's entailed for a multidimensional approach to help you narrow down your beliefs and to help you clear them for good. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. This is a fun one for us to get into. Tay and I have done a lot of work looking at beliefs too. I think this is a really good time to look at all of our beliefs and challenge them. And Lion says, look where there's problems in your life. And a lot of times where there's problems in your life is where you will find the beliefs that need to be addressed. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoy the show. Leave me some comments. Let me know if there's anybody else you would like us to interview as well, and we will talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast as we continue on with our series on energy, frequency, vibration, and magnetics, the next era of healthcare. And today's guest is Lion Goodman. And Lion is a professional certified transformational coach, author, and teacher. He is known as the subconscious pattern detective. He developed the Clear Beliefs Method, a process for permanently clearing limiting beliefs and healing core wounds from the psyche, which he teaches to coaches, healers, and therapists around the world. His Clear Beliefs Coach training is an ICF certified program with more than 550 graduates in 45 countries around the world. Lion spent more than 40 years studying and practicing developmental psychology, neurobiology, linguistics, philosophy, attachment theory, shamanism, and dozens of personal growth and spiritual practices. He's taught workshops and trainings across the US, Canada, Europe, and China. He's the author of 5 books, including Creating on Purpose and How to Clear Your Clients' Limiting Beliefs. He's published dozens of articles on consciousness, beliefs, psychology, and inner development. Lion provides transformative coaching to coaches, entrepreneurs, and leaders around the world. Lion, what a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, Taya, for having me. It's really great to be here with you.
We reached out to you early on when we were trying to put this series together because, as most people know, as we're talking to different guests, we're talking about energy, frequency, vibration, magnetics, all of these different things. But we kind of felt that something that was really important to touch on, because it's at such a core level for most people, is really beliefs. And in some capacity, that may affect all of these other things. And so we'd come across your work, how long back?
About 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, when we were doing a workshop with
Anadea
Judith. It was actually on the book that you guys wrote together, Creating on Purpose was the workshop that we were doing. And so she actually said if people want to really go a deeper dive into beliefs, they needed to go check out your work and take your course. So we reached out to get you because we knew from what our experience was, you were kind of one of the main guys knowing about beliefs. So we wanted to tap your brain on that and bring that awareness to this audience.
I'm happy to bring what I know here and also what I don't know.
Well, why don't we start off? I'd love to know I always like to understand people's journeys a little bit as far as how did you get into just making your whole life in so many ways around the detective of subconscious patterns and underlying beliefs?
Well, I started out at a very early age believing that there was something wrong with me. And that was good rocket fuel. It's like if you think something's wrong with you, you want to fix it. So I studied everything I could to try to fix myself. Fortunately, after decades of study, I found out that there was nothing essentially wrong with me. So that was good news, but it did cause me to go on this long journey of learning. And I was lucky to have a teacher very early on when I was 19 years old who asked the questions, what is the nature of human nature? And what is the nature of human consciousness? And that kind of spurred me to study everything I could in college, from philosophy to drama and even mime, dance, as well as neurophysiology, philosophy, psychology, everything I could get my hands on that could answer those two primary questions. And so that inquiry became a lifetime inquiry, because the human consciousness is so vast and who we are as people is so amazing and multidimensional that you end up applying everything to you. Cosmology we're part of cosmology. We're part of the universe. We're made of star stuff. Geology, we're made of matter. You can take any topic and apply it to yourself. And this was what my teacher taught me, is that any topic can be made relevant by applying it to yourself. So it was a grand life study, self-study, and it got me here because I realized everything kept pointing to beliefs as the core issue that it affected our behavior and our choices and our vision and our perception and how we lived our lives and what we thought and how we related to each other. So everything kept pointing to that thing called beliefs. And so I began my study in depth of beliefs, and I studied everything I could about them. What did other people say about them? How did they change them? What were their methodologies? And I ended up taking over 100 workshops and trainings to answer that question. And what I found was that most of the techniques that were out there worked a little bit, kind of partially, temporarily. It was good for a while. I got a little high, from the experience. But then I was back to my old tricks, 2 weeks later. So that took my journey to the next level, which is how do you change beliefs completely and permanently so that they don't come back? How do you really change? What's the core of transformation within the self?
Beautiful. You mentioned something too, where you said human consciousness, and consciousness has come up in lots of the conversations, and I know will come up in more of the conversations to come. I'm wondering, from your perspective, from when you were working with your teacher and what you've kind of arrived at now, when you think about the concept of human consciousness, what does that mean?
Again, I was very fortunate to have this teacher who had his own theory, and he had a PhD and a couple of master's degrees from the University of Chicago. He also had a school in the mountains of Colorado in nature. He had what he called the Brain in Nature course. And so we were studying neurology, sitting around in the forest with deer walking by to understand ourselves and applying neurology to our own development. And he said in physics, there are 4 fundamentals: space, time, energy, and matter. And the reason they're fundamentals is because you can't say they're made of something else. So we know that space-time is related, space and time are related in some way, and energy and matter are related, E equals mc squared. And he said consciousness is the 5th fundamental. There is nothing more fundamental than consciousness. And someone said that, there are things and there's awareness of things. And if you include both, you've got the whole universe. So consciousness is fundamental to who we are as beings. It's everywhere. There's a philosophy called panentheism, which is like everything is conscious. And that's what I believe. Everything has a certain level of consciousness. It is a fundamental. How was the universe created? It was a good idea. Where'd the idea come from? It came from consciousness, some essential consciousness that said, this would be fun. So that's how I see it.
I'd love to jump into beliefs a little bit. So what are beliefs and where do they come from? I mean, what are some of the biggest influencers of our beliefs?
Okay, well, let's see, do we have a couple of days to talk about this?
Just a short question to kickstart things off.
Yeah, okay, good. I could talk forever on this topic. So the simplest explanation I have is a friend of mine, Jeremy Lent, wrote a book called The Patterning Instinct. And I think that's the best name for it. It's like when we are born, we have an instinct to try to take this swirling, shifting experience that you're having as a newborn and somehow figuring out how to navigate within it. So if you entered a new universe that you had never been to before, where the rules were all different, what would you do first? You'd look for patterns. Gee, that little squiggly thing looks like that little squiggly thing. That shape is similar to that shape, but they're different sizes. So our instinct is to find patterns. And for a baby who's born needing parents to survive, the survival instinct kicks in. It's like, what do I need to figure out in order to survive? So when this face comes close to me, I get taken care of and I feel warm and nurtured. When that face comes toward me, I feel frightened and uncomfortable. So this is early pattern detection. It turns out that infants in the womb, fetuses in the womb, are doing this already. Babies in the womb can recognize the difference between the mother's voice and the father's voice. And if the mother is experiencing fear, for example, from war or poverty or abusive husband, her hormones, her fear hormones are going through not just herself, but also through the placenta into the baby. So the baby's experiencing the same fear she is. And the baby may conclude, because babies have conclusions also, the world isn't safe. Now, that's not going to be a verbal concept. It's an experiential one, because babies don't have words yet. We don't have words for the first couple of years of our life. But we do have conclusions. We do figure out how to move the body. And I have a 1.5-year-old grandson who just started, using a spoon, right? He's able to get food to his mouth. And that was a long period of trying to figure out how to get food to his mouth. He started using his fingers pretty quickly. But watching that development, it's like, oh yeah, he's identifying how does this muscle work so that I can do this without doing this? It's like, it's just so cute to watch. And if you watch developmental the development of babies, they're doing this, they're figuring out the world, and they're experimenting also. They're little scientists. So they'll throw something off of their high chair, and then mom goes and puts it back, and they go, oh, that's fun, let's do that again. It's like, I can control mom's behavior. Look, I can make something go away and it comes back. Isn't that cool? So this is the joy of growing up in a healthy household, is that you get to explore and find out what the world is. And babies also want to imitate their parents, so they're listening to language very early, and they're understanding language before they can speak, before they have the power over their vocal cords. So they're imitating, and this is just part of growing. So we're trying to figure out the world, and that's what beliefs are. They are the things we figure out, and mostly for our survival. Now, what's interesting is that if you want to belong to a group, what's the best way to belong? You take on their beliefs, right? You've probably heard of Stockholm Syndrome, where if somebody gets captured by terrorists, in a couple of weeks, they end up spouting what the terrorists believe, right? Well, babies are experiencing Stockholm Syndrome. This big person in their life, it has their life in their hands. They could die at any moment. Their parents could throw them out to the wolves or shove them down the toilet. So they want to adopt the beliefs of their parents, because that will make them like their parents, similar to them, and therefore their parents will like them more, and therefore they will survive more. So this is the real fundamental underpinning of beliefs, is we're putting together an understanding of the world so we can navigate in the world and survive. And we take them on eagerly because they are survival tools.
Well, that probably makes sense then as to why beliefs sometimes can be so incredibly difficult, or at least it seems to be so incredibly difficult to make changes to if they're rooted in survival instinct in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. There's a part of the brain-mind system that says, don't change that belief. It's what enables you to survive. Or if they are I am beliefs, if they're self-beliefs, that's who I am. I can't change that because the I am is the ego's need to be sustainably itself, And so, yeah, the beliefs are very deeply, they're the infrastructure of the human mind. In the same way that neurons and glial cells are the infrastructure of the human brain, beliefs are the infrastructure of the human mind. They are what we create our world with. They're like, infrastructure, like the pipes underground. If they were all above ground, we couldn't walk around very easily. So we put these beliefs in our subconscious mind, and they're our operating system. I often call it the human operating system. So if you're going to mess with a human operating system, you'd better be careful. And the ego does not want it to be messed with.
When do beliefs start to become problematic? So people, for the most part, if a belief is really working well, then that seems to be a good thing to hang on to. But I think the tricky part is when I guess two parts. Either we realize that we've got a belief that is not necessarily serving us very well anymore, or we're not even conscious of the fact that we've even got these subconscious beliefs that are actually, in many ways, dictating what our life is going to look like. So when does that start to become a problem? And then how do we even start to become aware of that in the first place?
Problems. When you have problems in your life, that's when you start questioning your beliefs, right? But let me take a step back. So because beliefs are the infrastructure, they're also the lenses we look through. So if you come to the conclusion, or if you're programmed with the belief life is hard, everywhere you look, you see life is hard, because like sunglasses that allow some frequencies in and bounce some frequencies off, our belief structure is a lens that we look through. And when we're looking through it, we see it's true. We see evidence everywhere, and we ignore evidence that's contrary to it. That's called confirmation bias in psychology, right? So we see what we believe. So people can get stuck in their beliefs really deeply and hard. If you've ever tried to convince a fundamentalist in any realm, religion, politics, science, that there's something other than what they believe, it's really hard. Basically, people dig in deeper when you try to change their beliefs by even presenting facts. Facts are, that fact doesn't fit in my worldview, right? So as an operating system, we're constantly looking through it. Now, as children, we're adopting beliefs to survive, and they're good if you survive. That's a good belief to have, right? So, for example, a child who has an angry parent might come to the conclusion and strategy. So I'm talking about beliefs and strategies as elaborations on each other. If I stay quiet, I won't get hit. That is a very good adaptive behavior. It's an adaptive belief, right? It helps you survive. Now, one of the problems with the mind is that it has a fundamental belief or a fundamental structure that says, if I'm in danger and I do something and I survive, I have to keep doing that thing to keep surviving. And this is one of the deep pattern sets that we get into. So the child who comes to the conclusion, if I stay quiet, I will survive, and they do survive, then they end up being a quiet person for the rest of their life. And so it was adaptive as a child, but it became maladaptive as an adult. So now it's actually getting in the way of their life because they're not speaking up for themselves. They're not getting what they want, right? Because they're keeping quiet so they don't get in trouble with dad or whatever it was in the first place. So that's how we get in trouble, is that old beliefs don't go away. They don't have expiration dates like meat at the butcher counter, right? They should. This belief will expire in 5 years, or when you find a better one, whichever comes first. That'd be great. But what happens is they just get stored in the subconscious mind, and other beliefs get put on top of them. It's like snowflakes coming down. Each one is a belief, and it's not a big deal, one of them, but if there's millions of them, they create snowdrifts. Right. So the snowdrifts start to get in our way, these piles of beliefs. And then what happens is, as we're growing, we come to contrary beliefs, like Santa Claus is a magical being who comes down your chimney and delivers presents. Oh, wait a minute. Mom and dad are Santa Claus. Okay. Now, Santa Claus is a magical being doesn't go away. It just gets pushed down by mom and dad or Santa Claus. So the magical thinking that was there is still there, but it's deeper. And so we pile on all these beliefs, and the conflicting beliefs are the ones that really mess us up. And we have tens of thousands of beliefs and probably tens of thousands of contrary beliefs. So, I want to lose weight, but I don't really want to give up sweets. Well, those are two beliefs that are in conflict with each other. I want to be healthy, but I hate exercise. Now we've got two beliefs that are pushing against each other, and resistance creates persistence. So you've got a persistent condition. That means there's two beliefs that are pushing against each other. And now what? Now you either feel stuck or stymied, or you procrastinate because you've got this battle going on, or you are in a relationship where the same blow up happens over and over again because there's belief conflicts. Or you go on a diet and then you get off, and you go on a diet and you get off, and you go on a diet. We've all known that pattern, right? So that's where we get into trouble with our lives, is when there's repeated patterns, when things don't change, when there's something we don't like, when we're procrastinating, when we're stuck, blocked, or where there's resistance to doing what we naturally know is best and want to do. That means there's old beliefs in the way.
Lion, how do you identify or distinguish between beliefs and core beliefs? Because even when you were speaking of, I'd love to lose weight and I love sweets, I feel like, especially after having our third child, I came to the realization that all of these things that we oftentimes struggle with on a surface level, I want to lose weight, I want a better job, I want to have peace with my spouse, all these things that we kind of go on a daily basis and think about and consider periodically, I feel like that's just on the surface. And I know on my own journey, the more I sat with those considerations and thoughts that came up, underlying a lot of those superficial conversations or monologues that come up within our lives is the I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I'm not worthy. And those are hard to come to, because I know for me, when I personally sat with it long enough, contemplated, considered these things on a deeper level, just wanted to kind of get to the heart of issues. When I got to the I'm not lovable, it was like a really loud, ugly cry that came out as a release when I was sitting with that and working through that. So I was wondering, based on your practice and what you've seen, how do you distinguish between superficial beliefs and really core beliefs, like underlying all the stuff that comes up on a daily basis?
Great question. And the core beliefs are often I am beliefs. They are self-beliefs. I am not good enough. And or there's something wrong with me. And just to give you an example, there's something wrong with me is, to me, the most popular belief out there. It's one that I've seen in most people around the world. It doesn't matter what culture you grew up in. And when I looked into it, I said, well, what's the basis of that? Why would a child come to that conclusion? Well, I realized that, when you're an infant, you're looking around at your siblings, your older siblings, and your mother and your father, and they're doing things like feeding themselves and walking and talking and communicating, and you can't do that. And so what conclusion could you come to other than, wow, there must be something wrong with me? Nobody says, hey, you're a baby, you're right on time, everything's cool, you're going to grow, we're going to teach you how to do this, don't worry, just relax, be a baby, it's cool. Nobody says that to the babies. The baby's kind of going, well, what's going on here? Why can't I do those things? Then, of course, if you have older siblings, you're growing up where they can do things you can't do all through childhood, right? Because they're 2 or 3 or 5 years older. And so, I'm not good enough. I can't do what they can do. No, you're right on time. It's like everything's cool. You're good. It's like you will be like them when you get to their age, but there's this thing called time, and you're on this time schedule. So we come to these conclusions, and children come to conclusions about themselves because they can't blame their parents. That would be anti-survival. Wow, mom and dad are really screwed up. They should have taken psychology 101 in high school, and they need some therapy, serious therapy, and they should do a couple workshops because they have no idea how to raise me as an infant. Like they can't do that. They don't have the sophistication of mind to be able to do that. So they are sort of self-creating their life. They're figuring out who they are. They're experiencing their circumstances, and they're coming to conclusions based on the circumstances and blaming themselves. There must be something wrong with me. I'm not lovable. They don't know that, no, it's your mom's busy. She's got 3 other kids and a job, and your dad's off to work and traveling. There's not enough care for you. It's not your problem. It's not your fault. It's just the circumstances. Now, a child doesn't know that. So they conclude, wow, I'm not getting the love I need. I'm not getting the care I need. I'm not getting nurtured. I guess it's because I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me. So this is where core beliefs start. And core beliefs often are formed in the first 2 years of life before we have words. The problem with most therapies and belief change technologies is that they're verbal. You have these techniques based on words and sentences, but that's not where the core beliefs are. They're not connected to the verbal mind or the conscious mind. They're subconscious and they're pre-verbal. So you have to get to the experiential part. That's what you did, Teo, by sitting with the feeling. You got to the experience of it and found the truth of the experience. So that takes some deep diving, and most people aren't willing to do that. So in my work, we focus on core beliefs because beliefs come in clusters. So they're kind of clustered together like a whole bunch of balloons tied together, right? And there's one at the center that's kind of the core. That's the pre-verbal one. And then these other beliefs get attached to them and they start reinforcing themselves. So if you can get to the center balloon and pop it, the whole thing can fly apart. But mostly you're sort of picking them off at the outside, but it takes time to do that until you can get to the core. And then when the core pops, boom, it's gone and it doesn't come back. So it's powerful work when you can get to those core beliefs. And in my training, I teach 14 different methods for finding core beliefs. It's that important. And it's not easy, and it does take some finesse and some understanding of how we come to them and then how they start operating in our lives.
That's very neat. And I love that because my own background, and I gravitated towards these realms because of my own experiences in life, which made me feel unlovable, not good enough, the usual, which is very common. We see it when we, as you probably know, it's like the more you work with people, everyone is coming in with very similar core beliefs. So for us to have workshops and for you to have workshops and events, you just recognize these commonalities that just as a consequence of being in human form at this time, there are just these commonalities as far as the core beliefs that we are all coming face to face with. I know that, and I can't wait to actually attend one of your events and one of your trainings, because I'm sure it'll be phenomenal and we'll be able to dive deeper and deeper, because we've also found that just when you think you've you've worked through some of the core beliefs, it's almost like peeling an onion. There's just more and more depth, more layers that kind of rise to the surface. Like, oh, I thought I worked through you.
Well, or you find like it shows up in another relationship, but it's the same underlying core belief. So it might be like, okay, I feel like I figured that one out with my partner. And then next thing you know, years later, you're like, I kind of feel like this might be a similar core belief that's going on with my work environment or even with my kids. And you realize that you're kind of sort of working at it or getting an opportunity to work with it from another perspective, but it's still touching those same chords.
That's true. And also beliefs, because they're the infrastructure, depending on what your circumstances or relationship is, it's going to stimulate the same core, right? But different beliefs get stimulated by different circumstances and different people. So Taya, you mentioned attracting people of a certain kind, and beliefs also operate as a kind of attractant, because your wound is like a searchlight, looking for somebody that has the opposite wound, the equal and opposite wound. So we're constantly looking for someone that can fill that space. But because babies learn what love is from their parents, from watching their parents interact, watching them interact with themselves and their siblings, that's what love is. So if there's abuse going on, or there's arguments going on, or there's withdrawal and isolation going on, like there was with my parents. My parents were like two ships in the night passing, by, not talking to each other for the most part. So what happens is the child goes, that's what love is. And so then when they become an adult, they start looking for a person to love, who will love them. And so they look for someone who feels and smells familiar. And familiar has the same root as family, right? It's like, so the subconscious mind is looking for someone who will reproduce that state, even if it's abuse, even if it's arguments, even if it's, withdrawal and isolation. So that's why people get into these repeated patterns. They're just looking for love. At the conscious level, I want someone who's, gorgeous and talented and, will love me and has, but subconsciously that searchlight's out looking for somebody that's just like mom and dad. So that's why we keep getting married to mom or dad or both.
And that's when you go, shit.
Exactly.
How did this happen again?
Well, and I know firsthand, when I really did a deep dive into beliefs too, it was after going through literally relationship after relationship that was the same pattern, but just kind of got more intense and more intense in the same pattern until I really started to work with it. And like you said, there's lots of different ways to try and work with it. And you might get some practices that really dive into it and other ones that might get parts of it. I remember when I first did it, and part of it was just around the core belief of being okay with being in a loving relationship. And I remember even opening that up. And when we sort of went through it, it was like just even being okay, being in a relationship, period. So it really took me down the rabbit hole of sort of working with that. And same like Tara said, a lot of the core underlying beliefs around not being lovable, not being good enough, a lot of those things at some point usually surface. And like she said, they're an intense visceral sensation in the body when you come to those. But it was shortly after working with that then Taya and I met, and we had both kind of been working on those things. And it was almost like that pattern really got dissolved. It really did dissolve. And then it seemed like from that I think of it almost like from a state of consciousness, as like I was living in a certain contracted state of consciousness that only allowed certain possibilities of the infinite possibilities that I was privy to. When that got dissolved, I literally expanded into a different state of consciousness that brought other options like Taya into my life, which was not there until that allowed itself.
Exactly. And that's what happens when you clear core beliefs or clear beliefs in mass, is that new possibilities open. Now you're not restricted. Your vision's not restricted by the old beliefs. Your behavior is not restricted by your old beliefs. Your relationships are not restricted by your old beliefs. You clear them and new possibilities open. You just stated it very clearly. As you do that process, as you clean out those old programs, we're people say the brain's like a computer. It's not really. It's the most complex thing we know of in the universe. So it's much more than that, and it's also multidimensional because we are multidimensional beings, and our experience is multidimensional. We're seeing, hearing, feeling, thinking, emoting all the time, constantly, everywhere, right? So we are multidimensional. Our experience is multidimensional, and beliefs are therefore multidimensional because they're made of experience. So in order to clear a belief completely, you need to clear it multidimensionally. And that's why most techniques don't work for complete clearing that results in permanent erasure, because you're just clearing it from the verbal mind, or you're just clearing it from the subconscious, but not the conscious and superconscious, or you're clearing it physically through, physical action, but you're not clearing it from the verbal mind. So that's what I discovered in all of my research, and finally figured it out. This is why most techniques don't work very well, because they're unidimensional. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So, oh, this technique works for everything. I'm going to, but it doesn't. So that's why I teach 15 different methods that are like a tool set. Like carpenter comes in to your house with a tool belt, he can fix almost anything, or he's got the rest in the car, So that's what I teach, is a tool set, because every individual is unique. Every individual's problems is unique. You have to treat them as an individual with their own background, their own beliefs, their own infrastructure. And then you can help people heal completely and do what you did over time much more rapidly.
You touched on this a little bit, but for viewers, can you break down a little bit the relationship with working with beliefs between things like subconscious, conscious mind, and then the superconscious mind, or the higher self, how those three things interplay when you're really wanting to work with beliefs?
Yeah, this is the basis of my whole program, which is that how do you deal with them all at once? What do you need to do to clear a belief from all aspects of self? First, you have to understand the nature of the self, this multidimensionality. And then you have to understand the nature of how we come to these beliefs through this patterning instinct and conclusions and strategies that work, and then now they're in the way. And then all of my techniques are based on a multidimensional experiential process. So, for example, I'll retake that. For example, the body wisdom process is one of our go-to tools, and it gets people in touch with the experience in their body of whatever that belief is creating the feeling of in their body. So that's where we often start. It's like, well, how is it embodied? You can use your consciousness to identify the shape and size of a sensation in the body, and then you can actually glean information from it. You can have it be like a messenger talking to you, and that's how we connect with the subconscious mind. So my goal is to communicate directly with the subconscious mind while being conscious, while being aware of the superconscious mind, so that all three are involved in the process at once, right? So we use the imaginal processes, visualization and guided imagery, because that gets the person while they're conscious. We don't have to put them in some trance state to do that. Close your eyes and imagine that you're walking through a forest. So they're conscious. They're allowing the subconscious mind to speak through its language. It doesn't speak in English. It speaks in images, sensations, feelings, and memories, right? So all the techniques that I teach are all about going right to that experiential core, experiencing it in and then when there's a clearing, it clears all at once rather than the little bits at a time.
I'm thinking of an example. So I know that in Anna Dea Judith's course that we did, the course on creating on purpose, which is based on the book that you and her co-wrote together, there was, it consisted of a lot of, similar to what you described, the meditation, the imagery, the visualization, and the experiential. So just one example of what was offered, and this is written in your book as well, was 15 to 20 minutes of an allotted time where you're surrounded by a number of people. So within our group at that time, within that particular workshop, I think we had 3 or 4 people in each group, but it's within that 15 to 20 minute time period, we would take turns, and the person in the middle would basically ask what she needed and what she required of the 3 or 4 other people within the group for the 15 or 20 minute period. And I remember it was a very visceral feeling for me that came up. It was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable to ask for that which I needed or wanted or desired from another person. And I think this is really powerful stuff because, you know, I had done a lot of talk therapy, and I feel like a lot of people who feel like there's something wrong with them, they go to the therapist and they re-traumatize themselves because all they're doing is ruminating about what has gone wrong. And I did that for a long time, and that did absolutely nothing for me. And I feel like because of that, I went into, similar to your path, went into psychology and philosophy to ask deeper questions, to try to dive deeper into human consciousness and what this is all about, in order to be able to make the necessary changes within me that I essentially longed to do. It was like this innate intelligence is calling me forth in order to, you know, work through all these issues and heal all these wounds so I can come to a place of wholeness once again. And these experiences that you offer, you know, within that book specifically, and I'm sure within your trainings, is really powerful. And it's one of those things where people can talk about it and can know about it, but going in and within the safety of a group setting that a facilitator like yourself creates, and there's other people there, so there's almost a sense of vulnerability also that comes up, of being looked at and being seen and being witnessed, that comes up. And then these experiences that are set up that we're working through and the feelings that sprout up from them, it's pretty phenomenal and powerful. And within that setting that you're creating, there's healing that's taking place.
Yes, yes, indeed. So it is through our experience. Remember, experience is multidimensional, right? So when you're put in a situation which you get to ask for whatever you want, knowing that people can say no, but you can ask for whatever you want, right? That is an experience that you haven't had in life. You know, who knows, your parents might have said, stop asking for so much, or don't be so demanding, or don't be needy, right? Well, children are needy. That's when you're told not to be a child, as a child, it's kind of confusing, right? So we start adopting and adapting to these admonitions and rules of our parents. And then we're cutting off a whole set of experiences that are fully human, right? We have these archetypes, like the king who says, bring me meat and bring me meat and bring me, bring me a beautiful concubine. And we kind of go, wow, that's cool, but I could never experience that. That's not me. So whatever we say, that's not me, that goes into the shadow, that goes into our subconscious mind. And so when you get to experience something you've never experienced before, it does stimulate all of those parts of you that go, God, why haven't I been doing this my whole life? It's like, why haven't I been able to ask for what I want my whole life? Well, there's a reason for it. And we just go right down to the reason, what was the experience that started that sequence of belief, behaviors, and decisions and choices. And when you do that, when you dive down into the core material, then you can lift it up, look at it and go, oh yeah, I don't really want that anymore. And, and then you have ways of getting rid of it. So that's the advantage of traveling the world or doing something you've never done before, is you get to experience something new, and that will bring up the old stuff that's been in the way. Now, I have this analogy. It's like if you were in the jungle and you wanted to go someplace through the jungle, but there's all kinds of stuff in the way, and you can't get from here to there, because it's so dense, right? But if you have a machete in your hand, you can clear whatever's in your way and take a step forward. And you can clear what's in your way then and take a step forward, and clear your way and take another step forward. And this is what I teach. I basically give people a machete to clear whatever comes up that's in the way, and then they can move forward in life. And then something else will come up, and their old belief will come up, and then you use the technology to clear that. And now you're limitless because there's nothing standing in your way.
Yeah, I actually really like that analogy. I used to use something in a similar way when we talk to patients around sort of how neural networks work, right? And how we get sort of lined up in certain patterns of thinking and certain patterns of doing. And I would usually explain it in a similar way, where I'd say, like, most of the time we just follow this path that's so well trodden, we know it with our eyes closed. And when you're trying to create sort of these new patterns, you literally have to pull out your machete and hack through the jungle. And it's a lot of work sometimes initially, but if you keep doing it over and over and keep going down that new path, eventually that becomes a little bit more streamlined, a little bit clearer, a little bit easier to go down. And the old one actually starts to, then the jungle grows back over it a little bit more. And then that actually becomes a little bit harder then to go down in quite the same capacity. And this new one starts to become more your default as opposed to that old one with practice.
Yes, that is the standard model for brain change. And I'm going to take issue with it. The reason that is how it's explained is because the core belief at the bottom is not cleared first. So you're trying to pound on the old belief. This is where affirmations came in, right? Well, if you just pound on that old belief enough, eventually it'll go away, but it doesn't. It just keeps coming back, right? So you got to pound on it some more. Well, eventually it doesn't come back quite as strong. This is like pulling weeds by stomping on them. Damn it, die, but it doesn't die. It just grows back stronger. It's like, screw you. I'm a plant. I'm going to come back. But if you pull the weed out by the root, then it doesn't come back. So this is where I take issue with all these. These are all outside in technologies. Well, if you're doing that, do this instead. And if you do it often enough, the habit will change over time. But most people give up way before that happens. Right? I mean, so it's just too hard to change habits. But if you go to the core and you clear what's at the core, then the new behavior just happens automatically. It's like, instead of throwing seeds on rocky, weedy ground, first you clear the ground, you clear the rocks and the weeds out. Then when you plant your seeds, then they blossom, grow, and bear fruit or flowers. Mm-hmm. And so why not do that? It's a much easier path. Otherwise, you're throwing seeds on rocky, weedy ground, and you're not going to get much impact.
Yeah, I love that line. I think that makes tons of sense. And it's kind of like the difference when that core belief gets cleared, then there's just not this anchor kind of holding you down. So it's like, rather than trying to push the rock up the mountain over and over and over again, it's like you just step into something different. Or because at least what it felt like to me whenever I've kind of gotten to a core belief is that it wasn't so much work to keep trying to do the next thing. It's sort of like when I talked about you step into a new field of consciousness, and sometimes what it feels like to me is it feels like then it actually feels, the feeling inside doesn't feel like work so much or trying to constantly motivate myself. You feel more inspired or more like you're being drawn up as opposed to trying to force yourself up.
Exactly. You're being pulled forward rather than pushing the rock. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One question I have is how is someone able to really authentically see their beliefs from a place of complete clarity when they're often looking at their beliefs through the lens of their own beliefs? How do you start to work with that conundrum?
It's tricky, isn't it? It's sort of like examining consciousness.
It's easy to kind of get caught up in almost like lying to yourself a bit, even though you're not wanting to, but you're being fooled.
Yes. I'm often asked, can I use these techniques to clear my own beliefs? And I say, absolutely, you can. But however, you can learn to cut your own hair. you're never going to be great at it. You'll be adequate, right? But you don't have the objectivity of a stylist, right? So you're going to be mediocre at best. However, so you can learn to cut your own hair, but you wouldn't want to try doing your own brain surgery. That's probably not a good idea, right? So brain surgery is like going to those core things that you can't see because you're inside of them. And so that's when we recommend working with a coach who can guide you through the process, who can see more than you can, because you can't see it because you're inside of it. You're operating through it, and it's transparent to you. So, all you see is the world. You're seeing reality around you, right? And that reality is shaped and colored by your belief structure. But you don't see the belief structure. You don't see the lens you're looking through. You're just looking out at the world. It's like if you wear glasses or contacts, you're seeing the world sharp, and then you take them off and you go, whoa, that's a different world. That is not as sharp as it was before. It's that kind of thing. It's like when you wake up, when you wake up through meditation or through enlightenment or whatever technique you're using, you start seeing more clearly, but you're still seeing through the old beliefs. And that's why they're hard to remove, because they're the structure that you're seeing through, that they're the structure you're seeing with, actually. That's how deep it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point. And I know, as much as I've even read stuff in books and worked on them myself, it's a very different experience to work with someone else, where I find a couple of things. I find it's just working with someone else where there's a different level of objectivity. They can see things and create an environment that you just can't always do on your own, or it could be a lot. They can create it in a much more easeful way than what you might have to try and do on your own.
Yeah.
They also can create a really wonderful, safe environment that I think has to be there in order for any kind of healing to occur. Especially when you think about a lot of these beliefs get rooted in fight or flight or in survival. So it's like, if you're going to be able to try and work with that stuff and clear some of them, it's not going to happen unless you're in a genuinely held sort of safe space.
True. Yeah, it's difficult to change your own deep core beliefs, but work with someone else who knows how to do it, and it's a breeze, really. We have a lot of fun with our techniques. It's not a laborious process, because it's so fast, because it's so complete, because it's so impactful, that people come out of a single session transformed. One major belief shift, and they're seeing a different world. They're going, oh my God, I feel differently. This thing that was burdening me is gone. I'll give you a quick story. I was working with a psychotherapist who had a great career, great practice, good marriage. Her life was in really good shape. And she came to me and she said, there's this one thing that's been bugging me my whole life. And I keep thinking something bad's going to happen. Okay, well, let's work on that. And in 1 hour, we cleared it. And she felt lighter, but I always like to check. So about a month later, I checked in with her and I said, how are you doing? And she said, well, it's amazing. After a lifetime of having that belief haunt me, it's gone. It just hasn't appeared. She said, wait a minute, it did appear a week ago, but I realized, I don't believe that anymore. And it went away. So that's real healing. That's when it's complete and it doesn't come back. It doesn't grab you anymore. That's how you know it's a good process. That's my acid test for any belief change technology. Was it complete? Was it transformational? Was it profound? Was it permanent? If so, I'm all for that technique. Most of them, sadly, are not.
What I did wanted to mention too is, like, for example, the going back to, asking for that which I long for and desire. And that which became really apparent that I had trouble doing within that sort of setup and experience within the workshop setting. What I walked away with is not necessarily an instant cleanup, where miraculously all of these beliefs that became moved from a subconscious level to a conscious level didn't all of a sudden disappear, but because they went from the subconscious to the conscious level, when I moved about from my life following this experiential workshop that I attended, then I had a choice that I wasn't aware of having before. So I had because I was able to see it clearly when that belief played out within my life of, can I ask for that which I desire? And I saw it playing out in a sense that I realized when there was a lump in my throat and I recognized, oh, I'm having trouble coming and asking from that place of what I long for and speaking it. Then I had the choice of, do I want to now continue the same pattern of shutting down and playing small, or do I now want to step up and state what I want in my life, what I want at the grocery store, what I want at the teller when going to the bank. So it became very apparent that I had a choice how I wanted my life to be on a daily basis. So it became a very conscious choice.
Yes, and what you're describing is what I call the path of awakening, and I've written an article on it. It's on my blog site. So first you are unconscious to the pattern, and then something happens that makes you aware of the pattern. Now that you're aware of the pattern, you can start seeing it while it's happening, as opposed to, wow, that pattern happened again. So you're you're taking it from looking backwards, like, oh, damn, that happened again, and I don't know why, to, oh, look, it's happening again. And the more you practice that, you get this space opening up between the stimulus and the response. Like, oh, he does that and I do this. And that's like automatic, right? And now I know that he does that and I do this. Now I can see that he's doing that and I can see I'm doing this. That's a raising of awareness to the level of it's happening. If you keep practicing that, more awareness, that space and time opens up. So the stimulus happens, and then there's this few microseconds, right, where you can say, I could react the same way. My intention, my natural tendencies to react the same way, but I don't have to. That's when choice appears, right? But you have to get to that space where you can see it happening, and then you can see it coming. And eventually you can see it coming from far enough away, and you've got enough space, you can say, I know what I'm about to do, and I'm not going to do that anymore. Mm. Then you're really in choice, and that's the place where you're awakened to the pattern. And then for me, clearing the pattern at the core is a way of speeding up that process. Oh, the pattern doesn't even come up anymore.
Oh,
it's
beautiful.
Gone.
I love that. I'm actually going to look for that blog and have the link below this video as well, so people can check that out. That's so good. When you were speaking and the way you were describing it, it reminded me of a quote from Viktor Frankl: between every stimulus and response, there is a pause, and within that pause lies our freedom to choose. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along those lines. And
absolutely.
And the way you're describing it is so poignant and so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem is, in most cases, the stimulus happens, the response happens, there is no pause. Mm-hmm. And so awareness that you described is opening that pause. And that's where choice happens. But most people are reactive. They're not responsive. They're, boom, boom, stimulus response. It happens in microseconds. Yeah.
And Lion, in your experience, from what you've seen and lived through, do you almost feel like our society is set up to kind of mesh that together, where we become constantly reactive as opposed to consciously responding?
Well, we know that with Facebook's algorithms and politics, as usual these days, that what sells is outrage. So we're living in an outrageous media environment right now, and outrage is that instantaneous reaction. Now, why do we live in that kind of environment? Because first of all, it sells, right? Facebook can sell more advertising by promoting outrage than it can by promoting, hey, if you meditate, you'll be happier, right? They don't get, people aren't that interested in getting a little better, but they want to feel alive, and outrage is aliveness, right? It's like I'm angry, so that my energy's up, and now I can, do something about it. So the society, it's especially a problem for the media and our media environment, because we are being poked and prodded by all the people that want our eyeballs. That's what they call it in the advertising business. How many eyeballs can we get? And so it's our attention that's being sold to the advertisers. Our attention is our most precious resource. Where do I put my attention? Am I conscious about where I put it? Do I choose well where I put it? Because wherever my attention goes, energy flows. So when I'm putting my attention on drama and outrage and killing and war and all these things, then I don't have time for self-development. I don't have any space or room for self-development or self-reflection. Now I'm all reaction and no reflection. So it is a problem in our society currently, which is why we're so polarized. And the only way we're going to get out of it is through greater awareness of the polarization, recognizing that you can either be right or you can be in right relationship. So which do you choose, right? If you want to be right, you're not going to be in right relationship. And if you want to be in right relationship, you have to give up being right. And that includes the people that we believe are wrong. It's like we're making them wrong for their beliefs or for their behaviors or for their actions. And I think it was Mahatma Gandhi who said, if it's eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, you're going to have a whole society of people who are blind and toothless. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we've created. And those of us who are in the consciousness movement and wanting to expand consciousness, we're able to see more and more of what's happening so that we can react less and respond better.
Beautiful. Can you give us an example of a belief system, or even arriving at a belief system within your workshop setting, and what the process looks like? Can you give us a taste of it?
Sure. First of all, one of the first things people do in my programs is fill out what's called the belief self-diagnosis. And that's where you look at your beliefs in 25 different areas of life. What do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about your capabilities? What do you believe about your relationships? What do you believe about others? What do you believe about money? What do you believe about life? What do you believe about God? What do you believe about death? Every area of life has a set of beliefs that we have in the subconscious. And so by asking the question over and over again, something I believe about God is, and then you listen and you write it down, then you say it again and again and again and again. And most people get 20 or 30 or more beliefs in every area. Some of those beliefs are very positive. Like, for example, look both ways before you cross the street is a really good belief for children. It's also a good belief for adults. We don't want to get rid of that one. That's a very healthy belief, right? Eat healthy food. Don't eat crap. That's a really good belief for everybody. So then now you're battling the programming we get from all the companies that are laden with sugar, salt, and fat. However, when you start becoming aware of your beliefs, you start uncovering them, bringing them, as you said, from the subconscious to the conscious mind. And then you sort them and you say, okay, which ones are helpful? Which ones are detrimental to me? Which ones are real problems? Let's focus on the real problem beliefs that are in my way in this program. And so in the program, we're focusing on the negative beliefs, especially negative self-beliefs, limiting beliefs, because they're limiting my world, limiting my capabilities, limiting my choices. The positive beliefs or the neutral beliefs aren't important, because what the heck, they're working for us, right? We don't have to clear all beliefs. And I'm often asked, well, can I clear all my beliefs? And my answer is, sure. Just make sure you have an attendant who can change your diapers and feed you, because you'll need that. If without any beliefs, you won't be able to navigate in the world. So babies come in, with almost no beliefs. So you want to go back to that state? Sure. But why not sort them and say, these are useful beliefs, these are not useful beliefs. These are the ones that actually help me live my life the way I want to. They're just beliefs also, but they're positive and helpful and empowering and sometimes enlightening. An enlightening belief is, I am source. Try that one on. Say it to yourself and feel what it feels like to say, I am source. Most people go, I'm not source. Don't give me that responsibility. But when you can own it, it's very expansive, right? And there's something wrong with me as a limiting belief, because it causes us to shrink down and limit ourselves, limit our possibilities. So first step is always uncovering the beliefs, and then working with the techniques that I teach, we clear the major negative beliefs one by one, and each one pops the person open. And everyone who goes through my training comes out saying, I came to learn techniques so I could help other people. I had no idea how much transformation I had to do, and I've done it, and I'm a different person. So that's my Clear Beliefs coach training, which I love. We just started one yesterday. So we do that twice a year. And it teaches all these techniques that I've developed and gathered for decades, so that people can help other people clear their beliefs as well as their own.
Beautiful. So in your experience then, because this is the part that's lacking, I feel, in Western psychology, the body. Where does the body play a part? Where do emotions play a part? The feeling sense, the felt sensation in the body, where does that play a part in healing or even recalling trauma, as you found in your investigations and in your experience?
Well, and that came up a lot in the last series too.
Yeah.
We did a whole series on trauma. It was like a 15-part series, and we talked to experts all over the world. And so much of how they're treating trauma now was all getting back into the body, where for a while it was very much completely outside of the body, but that seems to be recognition now of how important it is. So yeah, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Well, remember I said that my fundamental principle is that we are multidimensional beings having multidimensional experiences. If you leave any part of who we are out, you're not going to have an effective methodology. The more you include, the more effective it will be. So Peter Levine's work in somatic experiencing, very powerful healing methodology, because he gets people into the experience that their body's having when they feel traumatized. And that's much better than just mental. Are they also including the spiritual level? Are they also including the superconscious mind? Or are they also including the matter that we're made of and the perceptions that we have and how beliefs influence them? I hope so. It's certainly an effective method. I've studied with Lawrence Heller, who does NARM, N-A-R-M. I always forget what it stands for, but he was one of Peter Levine's main teachers, and then he went off and started working with developmental trauma. And most of the work we do with people, it's more about developmental trauma than incidental or shock trauma. So developmental trauma is when you're a baby and you're just not getting your needs cared for, and you don't know why, and it's not because anything bad's happening to you, it's just that your needs aren't getting cared for. And so you're crying and mom's too busy and she's read a book that says, let the baby cry. And you're traumatized over and over and over again because you're not getting cared for. So the baby says, okay, well, maybe if I'm quiet, I'll get cared for. Maybe if I roll over, I'll get cared for. Maybe if I flip myself out of the crib, I'll finally get cared for, So babies are trying to figure it out and setting up their patterns very early. So developmental trauma happens like over time with repeated experiences. So all of the techniques that I teach work with trauma brilliantly. I've worked with people who are unbelievably traumatized, stuff you wouldn't even want to hear about happening to them as children. And because it's complex, there's a lot of work to do. So in one case, it took 2 years to get my client, who was a shut-in in her house. She couldn't go outside, to having a business and functioning in the world. So it's powerful work, it's important work, but because we're multidimensional beings, if you approach it from a multidimensional approach, it's going to have more impact and be better than a single dimensional approach.
I think that's beautiful. And I know, like, from a clinician, I've seen, and just myself too, work along the lines of what you're doing is in so many ways, when people do that because they want to clear a belief to have a better relationship, or because they keep finding that they run into financial troubles. And when they clear some of those underlying beliefs, the amount of healing that goes on in that person's life is so much more profound than what they usually think they're going to get worked on.
Yes. Yeah, I'll give you a great example of that. I had a client who was a multimillionaire many times meaning he'd make millions, then he'd lose millions. He'd make millions, then he'd lose millions. And he was really tired of this pattern. You know, he was a brilliant entrepreneur, but he couldn't hold on to the money. He couldn't, it just kept flying through his fingers. So he said, you know, help me with this pattern. Okay, so we took him back into his childhood with guided visualization, with some of the processes I use, to the earliest memory he had about money. And he remembered, and he was having this full experience of memory, not just I remember, but experientially remembering walking on the sidewalk with his mom, 3 years old, and he sees a penny down on the ground, and he's very excited because he knows it's valuable. And he reaches down to pick up the penny, and his mother says, "Don't touch that, it's dirty." Okay. Now, why as an adult could he not hold on to money? Because mom said, "Don't touch that, it's dirty." And that, when we cleared that one, he didn't lose millions anymore. He just made millions. So there's an example of how a subtle single experience can warp your whole life, no matter what you add on to it as an adult. There's still something driving you from the very core of your psyche. And when you get to that, everything changes.
Yeah, and it's, you know, some of that stuff seems like people from an adult brain, they look and they go, no, there's no way that could do it. And it's like, once you kind of get down and brought right to the feeling sense of what actually happened at that time, from that perspective as that child. So I think what a lot of people forget is that, you know, looking at it as an adult is different than looking at it from a position of a child, where you've got much smaller sort of tool belt and understanding of how to deal with the world. And like you said, that's where most of our beliefs originate from.
A lot of people who are my clients, a lot of adults, say that they get overwhelmed by their feelings. And I remind them that as a child, their feelings were bigger than they were. And they were overwhelming to the child self, right? It doesn't matter what the feeling was. It could be love, it could be hate, it could be anger, but it's too big for me to hold, to handle, right? And so that pattern of overwhelm continued through their life into their adulthood, even though now today they are bigger than their emotions. They can handle emotions, right? So I give them tools to make that transition, to help the child self be protected, and the adult self, like, that's okay, honey, I'll handle this emotion. Like, you don't have to feel it. You can go out and play, you know. So we do a lot of inner child work, because that's so profound for people, is working with the parts of ourselves that are buried or hidden or hurt. And we bring them up, and we give them new parenting. We become the good parent of that inner child, so that they are now in a different situation. Because when a child's traumatized, that memory is like on a tape loop. And so a child who's traumatized for any reason, it keeps running over and over. That inner child is stuck in that place, in that trauma. And so we have a process called rescuing the inner child, where we go back and we actually change the location and the experience of that inner child. And now they're not stuck in that trauma anymore. It's quite magical.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I hope too, for people just that that have been working with all sorts of different things, even illness or chronic diseases and these types of things. A lot of times they don't always think of this type of work as being a part of what can actually make a huge difference and impact in their life around that. They're usually thinking in terms of seeking just medical, quote unquote, medical sort of intervention. But I often find this side of things is many times at the core of a lot of the discomfort and disease that people deal with. And when this gets corrected, it literally feels like the blueprint that you are then sending to the physical body actually adjusts. And now you start to create very real changes in the physical body.
Right. This is, Bruce Lipton popularized this whole field of epigenetics. And it's true, there's certainly a mind-body connection because we're all the same being, right? We have a mind, we have a body, we have emotions, we have our spirit. It's like we are one thing, highly complex, but we're one being. And so of course they're going to be interactive. Of course, if we repress stuff enough, we're not getting rid of it. We're pushing it somewhere. And we're often pushing it down into the body. And that thing that you've suppressed it wants to come out. It wants to manifest. All experiences want to be experienced. And so when we're suppressing or ignoring or distracting ourselves from our experience, it's got to go somewhere. And so we're stuffing it, shoving it somewhere in the system. And with enough shoving and enough stuffing, it's like blocking the intestines. It's going to come out somehow, sometimes with a tumor or with surgery, but it's got to come out because there's not the flow of experience. We're not staying with what we're experiencing. We're avoiding our experience or our feelings.
One final question before we start to finish up, but when people do dial in their beliefs and they really work with them and they become aware of them and they start to actually change them, do problems just disappear?
Wouldn't that be nice? So
I think it's a good caveat to bring awareness to people too.
Right. So particular problems disappear, but life is a set of problems. It's, if it weren't, we wouldn't grow. We'd just stay in the infant stage and everything would be wonderful, would be taken care of. But life is problematic, and the problems are what spur us to grow and change. So some of the problems will disappear because you don't have the beliefs at the core, but that doesn't mean you're completely enlightened and clear anymore. It just means, oh, there's more to do. But as you were, one of you talked about the onion, right? It's like you're working down to the core of the onion, and you know what's at the core of the onion, don't you? Space. So when you finally get to the core and you clear it all, you're spacious. You have room for whatever's happening, right? That's the state of Zen. I had a friend who was a Zen master, and he was just the most present person. It's like if you were in front of him, he was completely with you. And if there was a problem, he was completely with the problem. If it was with his child, he was completely with the child. So he had this spaciousness, gorgeous spaciousness in his life so that he could be present to whatever was happening. So as you clear, you become more and more yourself. You become more and more present. You become more and more flexible. You become more and more able to handle the natural slings and arrows of misfortune that occur because stuff happens, right? We know this. Stuff happens. So how do we respond to it? That's responsibility. That's our ability to respond. And the more open you are, the less old patterns you have, you're able to respond more appropriately. A mother who's done all this work on herself is going to be able to respond to that child in a loving, kind, and warm way. And the child learns, oh, life is good. I'm cared for. Oh, I fall down. I hurt my knees. Mommy comes and comforts me and I'm okay. I'm okay. Like I can handle it. That's where resiliency comes in. It's like children who are loved and cared for have more resiliency. They can bounce back because they know underneath all the layers that they are loved, they are welcomed, they're seen, and they are appreciated. So that's where we want to get our adult selves to also, is to that knowing.
Beautiful. And aren't we all being invited to work with all of this, especially at this time?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lion, any final words of insight or advice for our audience before we finish up?
Sure. I've always got advice. I'm full of it. So the message I want to leave our audience with is that, if there's something in your life where you're stuck, examine your beliefs. If you're resisting something, change your beliefs. If you're not feeling well in your body, look into your beliefs and find out what the cause is, because beliefs are at the causal level of our experience. If you're in a relationship you don't like, look at your beliefs. Beliefs are the infrastructure. They are the structure with which we experience the world. So when you change your beliefs, you can change not only yourself, but the world as well. And you may not be able to change another person because they have their own beliefs, but you can change the relationship because you're no longer the old self, you're the new self, and they will naturally change most of the time, not always. So your relationship to the world changes, your relationship to other people change. So beliefs are, for me, the core. They're at the causal level. Some people would look at this crystal we are and say, oh, it's all based on emotions. And then you turn the crystal and someone would say, oh, no, it's all based on your thoughts. And someone would turn the crystal and say, oh, no, it's all based on your body sensations. But it's the same crystal. I just happen to find beliefs are the best way, the most efficient way to make changes in this marvelous infinite crystal that we are.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lion. I was really, when we came across your work years ago, we knew at some point that we were going to connect with you. And with this lockdown, I mean, we're lucky because we have this platform. So we're able to reach out and connect with lots of amazing, wonderful people like yourself, even within the restrictions that are currently at play. But we know that sooner or later, we're going to be in your company and taking one of your workshops in person. And we're very much looking forward to that. And can you tell us, for our audience as well, how can people find you and what sort of work and assistance is it at this time that you're offering?
Sure. First, my Clear Beliefs coach training, which is a ICF accredited 20-week training, can be found at clearbeliefs.com. So that's the best place to go to learn about my training. You can learn about me and my coaching services at liongoodman.com. And we have a program called Clear Your Beliefs. If someone just wants to get their own beliefs worked on with a coach, clearyourbeliefs.com. So I have trained coaches all over the world who offer this program of belief clearing.
Lion, we're going to make sure that we've got all of those links in the show notes. So anybody who wants to check that out, we'll have the links below. Lion, what an absolute pleasure. We really enjoyed that.
I had a great time with both of you. You're a divine couple. I see the love and the light in your heart and your eyes, and it's a true pleasure to be with you.
Oh, thanks, Lion.
Thank you very much.